All right, boys and girls, I know you're probably really sad, but we're almost at the end of our study of life, and this is actually our last video that we have, so feel free to pause the video and use your tissues, and if you have to shed a few tears, it's understandable. Okay, but now that you're well educated and you're experts on the characteristics of life and what living organisms have to do in order to be alive and the intricate details of genetics and passing on heredity, cell structure and function and ecology and growth and development and evolution, you're really pro in those areas. It's time to tie it all together and just to look at one small problem we have, the diversity of life. There are so many different living organisms, plants and animals and fungi and bacteria, and even an oddball kingdom, we'll see in a second, that a protista, that we need a way to organize them, and that is what we're going to look at here quickly. This system that's developed called taxonomy. And the idea of classifying and grouping organisms, which actually I've been tricking you all along. You already know how to do this. Relatively speaking, when we looked at phylogenies and cladograms and comparing organisms and trying to do evolutionary trees of life, you actually did this concept. So you're already well ahead of the learning curve. So let's just take a look really quickly at what this system is and how it works, and some of the details before we begin trying to look at them and use this system in action. So, as we said, there really is just so much diversity that we can't study every single living organism. Instead, what we do is study major groups of organisms and their defining features, their characteristics that have evolved over hundreds of thousands and tens of millions, hundreds of millions of years to make them what they are today. Because it's really a great trick. If you actually learn about major groups, you don't have to learn about every single living organism. You just need to know that that organism belongs to a group, and by default you know about it. So how do we know about all of these things? It's really a simple system called taxonomy, in which, as we said, we group and organize these living organisms. And it was created by a Swedish botanist named Linnaeus. Now, a botanist, recall, is someone that studies plants. He's kind of given the credit for this because he came up with a really simple system that has been tweaked and developed since then, but really gets us to where we need to be. So let's take a look at that system. How we utilize that based on their differences. And by the way, now we have the ability to use DNA and genetic sequences, amino acid sequences, but the system itself was developed primarily on anatomical, physical structures, and that's still what many scientists, especially what we'll be using today. But keep in mind that we now have advancements in technology to use more specific details. So to look at this, it's really centered around this concept of binomial nomenclature. Now, remember, go back to what we said early on in our class, that what do these traits or these nerdy terms and what they actually mean. Remember that, as we said, bi means two, and if you look at nomial and the idea of nomenclature, what those actually mean, this is really saying a two-name name. Kind of redundant, but if you think about it, what we're going to see is that the beauty of this system, it gives every single living organism, in fact, a scientific two-part name. Kind of like all of you have a first name and a last name. That's kind of what Linnaeus has done here with this system. So if we look at it, let's use this guy as an example. This is a bottlenose dolphin, and if we use him, let's look at how this system, how we arrive at their scientific name. Because they're all given this two-part scientific name. It's written in Latin or a combination of Greek, and the reason for that is because many of the languages, Romance languages, have root words based in Latin and Greek. And also, if everyone uses this system, and it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere in nature, we can omit any confusion. For example, if we called this a dolphin, there are other scientists, other people, there's an actual fish called a dolphin as well. And there'd be some confusion if you're talking about a dolphin and I said, oh, this dolphin breathes with lungs. Whoa, 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 no, wait a minute. The fish dolphin breathes with gills. So this idea of using Latin and Greek eliminates confusion. And from that, it's made up from what is called the organism's genus and their species. So the first name is here in the genus, and we'll see in a second. The second name, or the last name, the specific species name, is from this. By the way, there is our dolphin. You can see it looks strikingly different. It's a fish. It breathes with gills right here. Has scales. Totally different organism. So let's look at that, how we actually get that scientific name. What we do is we begin by placing this organism into different levels, or taxa, different groups, plural, singular being taxon, and they increase in specificity as you go down the chart. In other words, we start with a very broad, basic, diverse group, and as we move down, we become more and more and more specific. So the general grouping, there's one more group up here called domain, but we won't worry about that for now, is simply kingdom, which is the largest group, phylum, the next smallest group, and it goes down class, order, family, and then genus, and finally species, like the word specific, means one organism. So unfortunately, I mean, Bentley, how do I remember kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species? With science, just as with math, mnemonic devices are really the way to go here. In other words, make up a simple, silly saying, alliteration, that has words that begin with a K, a P, a C, an O, an F, a G, and an S. And I don't, in all honesty, I don't care what you develop, what you come up with, you do need to remember and know this. So for example, a saying such as kings play, K for kingdom, P for phylum, cards on fat girls' stomachs. I mean, it's kind of silly, but if you look, all the letters here, and that might trigger your memory to, oh wait, how does this go? Kingdom, phylum, what comes next? Cards, oh, C, class. It'll help you memorize and understand them. So let's take a look, go back and use our bottlenose dolphin here. Again, that's a common name. To say dolphin might be a little too confusing to see how that guy is characterized. So there's our organism. It belongs to the kingdom Animalia. Now, Latin, Greek roots, I bet you can guess, though. I know you're not fluent in Latin and Greek, but you can probably guess what Animalia means. Animals. So think of all the other organisms that would also be in that kingdom. Butterflies, snakes, fish like the dolphin fish, ladybug, beetle. I mean, we could say earthworms. We could say it forever, but they're pretty diverse and different from dolphins. All that they have in common is that they're multicellular. They are heterotrophic, meaning they cannot make their own food. And other than that, they're pretty much different and diverse. An earthworm is nothing like a dolphin other than those two characteristics. So that group is pretty broad. So we need to narrow that down. So we go into the phylum. Now this group gets a little smaller. This phylum, Chordata, if you look at that, references cord, or a nerve cord, or a spinal cord. So every organism in this group has to have a spinal cord, or a dorsal hollow nerve cord. So that would also include the fish, but that would eliminate, at this point, beetles are gone. They don't have that spinal, that dorsal hollow nerve cord. An earthworm is gone. They do have nerves, but they belong to different phyla. So we've eliminated them, so our groups are getting smaller. Class, Mammalia, again, probably can tell that word, mammal. So the only organisms in this group would be the mammals. You have to be warm-blooded. You have to give birth to live young. You have to nurse your young. So that's going to eliminate fish. Fish are Animalia, fish are Chordata, but fish do not belong to this class because they're not mammals. So you can see that we're describing physical characteristics. Cetaceans are the ocean-going creatures like whales and dolphins. The family, Delphinidae, are the true toothy, you can see it kind of looks like dolphins there. And the genus and the species. This is actually the bottlenose dolphin's scientific name, Tursiops truncatus. And if you look at it, truncatus is actually referring kind of like an elephant's trunk here. It's describing the organism. There is no other organism on the planet that has that genus and that species, which is kind of nice because it clarifies. Now keep in mind that in genus, for example, if we used like for a dog, a common dog, it belongs to the genus Canis, like canines. But also in that genus would be a wolf, very much like a dog, a coyote, very much like a dog. And it's not until we get down into the species level that we would see for the dog, Canis, lowercase letter there, familiaris. So it's, oops, sorry, spelling error there. So that's a dog's scientific name, Canis familiaris, where a wolf would be Canis, oops, lupus, la loupe, L-U-P-E in French means wolf. Coyote would be Canis latrans. So each organism, where they're in the same genus, shows you they're very, very closely related. But the species specifically, they do have little differences. So you can see this is a great system because it puts them into groups, kind of like what we did with evolution, and it simply characterizes them based on their physical characteristics, which is really, really nice. So if we remember this and we use this, we've got to remember just that when we write a scientific name, it should always be written in italics or underlined, just because to set it aside so it stands out to show it's a scientific name, and it is in a different language. And you always want to capitalize the first letter, the genus, and all the rest of it is lowercase when you write. Now you saw I write in capital letters there, so you want to be careful when you do that. So really quickly, just to give you an idea of diversity here before we wrap up and begin trying some activities with this, the kingdoms. There are many, many different kingdoms here. As we can see that there actually really are, scientists accept, 6 major kingdoms. You recognize probably animals and plants. Fungus, like a mushroom, would belong in here. These two are the bacteria, and these guys are oddballs. So just really quickly to look at them. Bacteria are actually 2 different kingdoms, but we'll clump them into one here for the sake. So think about what bacteria are. Microscopic, single-celled, and they're pretty diverse. Thousands and thousands and thousands of species. Some are autotrophic, some are heterotrophic. See, these guys are pill-shaped here under this electron microscope. But think germs. Bacteria, you actually have more bacterial cells in your body than your own cells, which is crazy. They're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. We have them all over the place. So they have their own kingdoms there. Fungus would be our mushrooms, yeast, molds, etc. These guys have cell walls made of chitin, and they don't actually photosynthesize. So these 2 characteristics here set them apart from plants. Remember, they're decomposers, so they're not plants. They cannot photosynthesize. So therefore, that characteristic, along with a different cell wall not made of cellulose, they got to go in their own kingdom. So I mean, you can have it's the fact that, ew, this black stuff growing on the wall, mold, yeah, that's an organism actually. It's kind of creepy. Life is very, very diverse. And speaking of diversity, this is our oddball kingdom, the protists. They can be single-celled, they can be multicellular, they can be autotrophic, they can be heterotrophic. These were created. You can see some of the examples down here. An amoeba. Many scientists actually put seaweed in this kingdom, although that is debatable, but they do lack many of the true plant-like characteristics. Some of the algae, single-celled organisms. So we've seen this guy here, for example. Where do you put it? You put it in your own in this kingdom because it's not an animal. It's not multicellular, but it does have a nucleus, it does have organelles, so it's a eukaryotic cell, but it's not a plant. It can't make its own food. Remember, it uses phagocytosis, engulfs these food particles to eat. So we got to stick it in this kingdom. So these are pretty diverse. You can see kelp in here. Some scientists would say they're plants, but many say no, they're not. They lack true plant characteristics. So this is our, as we said again, our oddball kingdom. We can see here paramecia, single-celled with these cilia hairs running around. Well, not really running, but engulfing food. Again, you have a wide, diverse array. Some of them can be photosynthetic, like this algae taking over this canal. Disgusting, but it's not a plant, but it behaves like a plant. So pretty diverse here. And speaking of plants, we all know plants. We've talked about these before. They're defining features here, and I mean, some of the diversity here, you can have these huge, like these redwood sequoias, ranging down to, like in your gardens right now, cherry tomato plants. So again, anything that has these major characteristics here would belong to this kingdom. And again, using the characteristics, we can separate them. And finally, where we would belong, last one we look at, extremely diverse, Animalia. You can see us, obviously humans. Think of animals. This bad Larry right here, who's just amazingly diverse. So all of these kingdoms in here, which by the way, almost everything you see in here actually are animals, which is kind of strange. Very, very diverse. We just want to focus on sorting and classifying them based on their physical characteristics. And again, if we do that, we can cheat. And if we know a little bit about each group, by default, we then know about the organism, as long as we know what group it belongs to. So let's do some activities and practice this, shall we?